Have you ever felt like school rewarded you more for obedience than for original thinking? You're not alone, and you might be onto something far deeper than you realize. Studies reveal a shocking trend. The best rule followers in school often end up being the least innovative adults. A 2014 study from the University of Pennsylvania found that nonconformists were 27% more likely to become entrepreneurs than their more compliant classmates. That's not a small number. That's a structural pattern. The irony? The very students who got straight A's, followed every instruction, and were labeled as gifted, were statistically the least likely to disrupt an industry or spark radical change. That's not a coincidence. It's a clue. Now pause and ask yourself, if education is supposed to prepare us to lead, to innovate, and to think independently, then how is it producing the exact opposite? Niccolò Machiavelli would already be smiling, because for him, the purpose of institutions has never been what they claim on the surface. In The Prince, he famously said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And what better place to disguise control than inside a system that claims to empower? Machiavelli understood that the most powerful forms of control don't look like control at all. The genius of modern education lies not in its rules, but in its illusions. Take this principle. It is much safer to be feared than loved. Sounds harsh, right? But now imagine this. What if fear was dressed up as care? Modern schooling rarely uses overt force. Instead, it trains us through subtle pressure, grading systems, praise structures, performance anxiety. The result? We internalize the message: be good, be safe, stay in line. Not be bold, be curious, challenge everything. This isn't a conspiracy, it's conditioning. And here's a crucial clarification. This is not an attack on teachers. Most educators deeply care about their students. But Machiavelli wouldn't be analyzing the people, he'd be analyzing the system. And the truth is, our current system wasn't primarily designed by child psychologists or creativity experts. It was shaped by industrialists, people who needed punctual, obedient factory workers, not rebellious thinkers. As Charles Eliot, Harvard's president in 1905, blatantly stated, "We want one class of persons to have a liberal education, and we want another class to forgo that privilege and fit themselves to perform specific, difficult manual tasks." That's not education. That's manufacturing compliance. And what did Machiavelli write in The Prince? That rulers should divide their populations into those who govern and those who serve. Sound familiar? So, let's be honest. If the goal were truly to create free, independent, courageous minds, wouldn't we be doing things very differently? The truth? The system might be working exactly as intended. So how exactly does the system shape us without ever needing to say the words control? Machiavelli would say it doesn't need to. The brilliance of modern education is that it controls not by force, but by programming how we think, feel, and even define success. Let's break it down into three powerful tools Machiavelli would instantly recognize: arbitrary discipline, external validation, fragmented knowledge. 1. Arbitrary discipline. Do you remember the endless rules at school? No chewing gum, no hats indoors, walk on the right side of the hallway, raise your hand to speak even if you have something urgent to say. These rules have little to do with actual learning. Their purpose is subtle but powerful: to normalize obedience to arbitrary authority. Studies in developmental psychology show that children begin to confuse obedience with morality by the time they're just 7 or 8. They start to believe that good means following rules, regardless of whether the rules make sense. That's dangerous, and it's exactly what Machiavelli warned about. In The Prince, he wrote, "A prince must keep his subjects satisfied, not through freedom, but through the illusion of order and purpose." That's what arbitrary rules in school do. They simulate order, and in doing so, they create citizens who follow directions without question, even when those directions hurt them. 2. External validation. Think back to the gold stars, the test scores, the report cards, the pride of an A+, or the crushing feeling of an F. From an early age, we're conditioned to measure our worth based on others' approval. Teacher likes you? You're smart. test score is low, you must be dumb. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. Men judge more by the eye than the hand, he said. Everyone can see you. Only a few can touch reality. When people learn to value themselves based on what others see, they become easy to influence, easy to lead, easy to manipulate. A 2020 study found that students with high academic perfectionism experienced greater anxiety, lower risk tolerance, and less confidence in the workplace. Why? Because they spent years depending on grades and praise to know if they were doing it right. This sets up adults who are terrified of being wrong. And guess what kind of people systems love most? Compliant ones. 3. Fragmented knowledge. In school, we learn in isolated buckets, math in one room, history in another, science somewhere else. We're rarely taught how these connect. This is by design. When knowledge is fragmented, it becomes harder to see the whole picture. The systems of power, the root causes of problems, the complex connections that matter most. Machiavelli would immediately recognize this as intellectual disarmament, a way of preventing the people from understanding how power really works. And here's the twist. At the same time, school teaches us that success is a competition. Class rankings, GPA curves, valedictorians, all reinforce the idea that your win means someone else's loss. A prince should sow discord among conquered citizens, Machiavelli wrote. Competition prevents unity. Unity is a threat to control. So the system divides us mentally and emotionally. It makes us believe that knowledge is disconnected and that other people are rivals, not allies. And when we do fail, the punishment is swift and humiliating. An F on a paper, a public red mark, or the subtle, silent shame of not measuring up. Ask yourself, how many times in school did you raise your hand to give an idea only to pull it back down in fear? That's not education. That's fear disguised as feedback. And fear, Machiavelli reminds us, is the most reliable tool of all. Let's now explore what happens when someone escapes this educational cage. Because believe it or not, the system doesn't just shape how we think. It tries to prevent how we might think if left free. And the first thing it suppresses is curiosity-driven learning. Self-directed learning frightens the system. In India, Sugata Mitra's famous hole-in-the-wall experiment placed a computer in a wall in a poor neighborhood with no instructions. Kids, many of whom had never seen a computer, taught themselves how to browse, play games, and even use educational programs, all without teachers. What terrified the traditional educational establishment was this. Children taught themselves complex systems out of pure curiosity. No syllabus, no lectures, no grades. Just questions, exploration, and discovery. This was the kind of raw, self-organizing intelligence that Machiavelli would warn a ruler to suppress. The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances. Real learning doesn't need to look impressive, it just needs to work. And that's precisely the threat. Because if curiosity is enough to ignite learning, why would you need rigid systems? The trap of external rewards. The system quickly learns how to shut this kind of learning down through rewards. A child who once loved drawing is suddenly told what is correct art. A curious student is told to follow the curriculum. Exploration becomes wasting time. And eventually the child no longer draws for joy. They draw for approval. They no longer explore ideas. They memorize answers. Psychologists call this the over-justification effect. When external rewards replace internal motivation, passion dies. Machiavelli would say this is strategic. Men are driven either by love or by fear. Replace love of learning with fear of failure, and control is complete. The fear of being wrong becomes a cage. Remember how mistakes were punished in school? A wrong answer could be embarrassing. A low score could stay on your record. A failed assignment could make you feel like a failure. But here's the truth. Mistakes are the source code of innovation. Richard Branson dropped out of school. Steve Jobs dropped out of college. Einstein failed entrance exams, all of them stumbled, and kept walking. Machiavelli would admire that, because he believed all courses of action are risky. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The system trains us to delay action until we're sure. But true creativity requires risk, requires being wrong, experimenting, trying something nobody approves of, yet. And that's what makes you powerful, because people trained to fear being wrong will never disrupt the system. You must become someone who moves anyway. Systemic creativity killers think back to school group projects. Were they collaborative or chaotic? Often, one or two students carried the team while others coasted. Creativity was discouraged in favor of following instructions. Why? Because creativity is unpredictable, and unpredictability is dangerous to control systems. Education systems favor answers with rubrics, not questions with no clear answer. But the future, the one you're actually living into, is built by people who ask new questions, not repeat old answers. The irony? Some of the most disruptive thinkers in history were horrible students. Why? Because they couldn't stop thinking outside the box and the system couldn't handle that. So it gave them low grades, or told them they were difficult or non-compliant, when in fact they were just awake. Let's end with what might be the most important question Machiavelli would ask. What do you do now that you see the game? He wouldn't tell you to complain. He wouldn't advise you to burn down the school. He'd challenge you to outthink the system that tried to condition you. Because once you understand how control works, you hold the keys to your own liberation. Your most dangerous power, internal validation. Machiavelli warned rulers, "He who builds on the people builds on mud." Why? Because people without inner strength shift with the winds. They're easy to influence. That's why traditional education trains you to look outward, for approval, for grades, for likes and praise. But what if you flip the script? What if your worth had nothing to do with test scores or applause? Maria, a former straight A student, once told me, "The moment I stopped caring about being impressive was the moment I finally started doing meaningful work." Internal validation doesn't mean arrogance, it means you know what you value. And you don't need a gold star to do what matters. This is the kind of strength Machiavelli believed real leaders had, the kind that makes systems nervous. Interdisciplinary thinking, see the matrix, not the pieces. Think about it, schools divide everything, math here, history there, science, separated from ethics. Economics without psychology. Why? Because fragmented knowledge creates fragmented thinking. And fragmented thinkers don't challenge systems, the world, they obey them. Machiavelli studied war, politics, and history all at once. Not in isolation, but as one map of human behavior. A prince must read history constantly and imitate those who came before him. True power comes from connecting dots that others don't even see as related. You must train yourself to ask, how does this fit into the bigger picture? When you read politics, ask what it says about human fear. When you study biology, ask how it relates to emotion. When you look at marketing, ask how it manipulates identity. That's what makes your mind ungovernable. You stop reacting, you start seeing. Calculated risk, the final skill of dangerous thinkers. Let's face it, risk is everywhere. Playing it safe is an illusion. Staying in your comfort zone is a risk in itself. Machiavelli wrote, "The wise man does it once what the fool does finally." He didn't say the brave man never feels fear. He said the wise man acts anyway. In a world where creativity is the currency of progress, the ability to move despite uncertainty is everything. That means trying things before you feel ready. It means launching that project before it's perfect. It means speaking up when it's easier to stay silent. Because the world isn't shaped by the most obedient. It's shaped by those who choose to act. Creating your own operating system. If traditional education is an outdated operating system, then it's time to build your own. And here's what that means. Define your own success. Not based on salary or approval, but on purpose and growth. Follow your curiosity as your syllabus. Let your questions lead, not someone else's checklist. Build real-world feedback loops, not just scores, but results, impact, reflection. Learn to love complexity. The more nuanced you're thinking, the harder it is to manipulate. Create meaning, not just knowledge. Apply what you learn to something that matters. The lion cannot protect himself from traps. and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. So one must be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. Machiavelli. You were trained to be a sheep, but your nature might be a fox, or a lion, or both. Now is the time to remember that.